Hinges are one of the most challenging parts of a project for me personally, whenever I'm adding doors to cabinets. I've always struggled to figure out where exactly I'm supposed to drill a hole to mount my hinge. You know, do I do it on the edge? Do I move it an inch in? I've often done this by trial and error. I try and figure out, okay, how far in should it go? Drill a big hole in a scrap piece of wood usually. I install the hinge, I go to my cabinet, I put it in, and then I measure how far off I was, and then I drill a new hole, and yada, 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 and the process goes on. And while I'm drilling the hole, I typically grab my 1 3/8 inch bit out of my kit here, and I drill the hole, and who knows if I'm steady because I just use my drill. I don't use my drill press, though I probably should, but that would just take too long. So then there's some variability as far as whether I'm putting the hole in the right spot after I've measured it. And you can see I often end up with very questionable hinge holes. But all of that goes away for a couple of reasons here. One is a jig that I found, and another is a really great spreadsheet that helps you figure out exactly where to drill your holes for your hinges. So we're going to take a look at both that jig and the spreadsheet in just a moment. So I promised you a look at both the jig and the spreadsheet. Let's take a look at the jig first. This is a Craig hinge jig, and it is a very simple jig. Super smart the way they made this, and I've been very impressed with it. This is mostly made out of plastic. It's nothing special, but it does have a nice drill bit with it here that you can detach, and you'll need to. We'll talk about why in a little bit. But it's got these adjustable cams at the bottom as well as a measurement here at the top. And this allows for perfect placement of where you need to drill your hinge hole. And so you can adjust these cams to whatever millimeter number you need between 3 and 6. And then you measure from the top how far in you need to go on your door frame. But there's one problem with that, and that is the jig helps you know if you're doing a precise hole. It does not help you know where it's supposed to go. And that's where the spreadsheet comes into play. Now, I've been using Bloom hinges on the last few projects that I have. Bloom actually is known in the industry for being some of the best hinges. You do pay for it. They are certainly more expensive than some of the other ones out there, but the quality in my mind is impeccable. And while I was poking around on the Bloom website one day, I found that they actually have a spreadsheet which helps you know with their particular hinges exactly where you should drill your holes. So what we're looking for here is the boring distance, and that distance is called an offset. So we need to basically know what the offset is going to be to drill our hinge hole. This board is a Poplar 1x3 that I used for my mudroom bench cabinet that I built recently. I've got 4 cubbies, so I needed 4 doors. And I made the doors out of this 1x3 Poplar, and then they're just shaker doors, slid through a 1/4 inch ply in the middle. So I just took out enough in here with my router to be able to slide that 1/4 inch ply in. So let's take a look at that spreadsheet and figure out exactly where we need to drill.
And you can actually download this right from the Bloom website. It's a macro where it's got a bunch of different pieces built into it. You can answer the questions in forward order or backward order. And what I mean by that is if you already know what hinge you have, you just answer the questions based on the hinge and your setup. And if you don't have the hinge yet and you want to figure out what hinge you need to buy, you answer it based on what you want. And so we're going to do it in reverse today because I already know the hinge. You saw it earlier. I purchased it for my mudroom bench project. And so for my mudroom bench, I had 4 cubbies, meaning I needed 4 doors. One of them was a full overlay, and 3 of them were partial overlay. And we're going to see on the screen in a second here what that actually means with their diagram. So let's click Start because you can't click anywhere else. You'll just get an error here that says you can't do it. So open up the workbook, you press Start. I did the frameless cabinet. This is important because the dimensions can change based on the type of cabinet you're building. So I did a frameless cabinet. We'll select that. We'll click Next. And then here's our diagram. You have the full overlay where it comes all the way up to the edge of the cabinet. So the door, the cabinet become flush. or you have a partial overlay where typically you have two doors meeting together. So on the end of my doors, they're going to open from the right-hand side to the left. And so the one all the way on the left is a full overlay. And then I have three that are partial. And so I'm going to select partial. We'll just walk through the partial in this particular case and go next, but you would have to come back and do it again for the full overlay if you have both. It's wood. I have the 110 hinges, so I already know that. And the Bloom Motion, this is the soft close where if you go to, sort of slam the door, it slows down as it gets to the end. Mine was integrated. I have the nickel and I do not have the tip on. I like the screw in personally. I don't like the press ins. And so I'm going to go ahead and select screw in. Those are the ones that I have. And then this is important. You need to know the thickness of your materials. So the frame of my doors, I made standard shaker doors, and I have 1/4 inch plywood in the middle of them, but the thickness of the outside of the doors it's 1x3 poplar wood. But just like all other wood, it's not that exact dimension. These are actually like 0.75 by 2.5. So we'll just call it 0.75. The 3/4 inch birch plywood that I used is really, it's about 0.656 rather than 3/4. And then the overlay. This is that center section that we're talking about. So picture two doors here, one on either side. And I want to have a little bit of a gap in between the doors. I don't want them rubbing. I don't want them touching exactly. These are going to get a lot of wear on them. My kids are slamming them back and forth. And so I want a small gap between the doors when they overlay. And so I'm just going to kind of divide the 0.6 by 3. So we'll call that 0.2. And that's going to be 0.2, obviously, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. And we'll have that little gap in the middle. And then this is additional information beyond what we're talking about right now. We're focusing on using that Kreg jig to drill the hole for the hinge. But obviously the hinge is also going to have to be hooked up to your cabinet. And so I have the screw wing mounting plates. And like I mentioned earlier, they do have the cams in them. So these are cam adjustable. And again, I'm working backwards. I've already bought the hinges. You can work forwards and select what you would like using this workbook as well. And it will spit out for you what part you actually need to buy. So based on what I've said here, I have a frameless wood partial overlay 110 degree requirement. So it's giving me the part number from Bloom that I need to buy. It's also pulled out all the measurements right here for me. What we're going to do is click this Go to Application so that we can see exactly what we need to know. It's going to give me a diagram here. And this is, again, we're doing a partial overlay for this example. So you're going to have a hinge right here. And again, it could be left, could be right, but this is just showing you how that door is going to end up. It's going to end up kind of in the middle of the cabinet right there. And the reveal is the space between the doors. And the most important thing we're looking for at this moment, because again, I've already bought the hinges, what I really need to know is that offset. I need to know the measurement from the edge of the door going inward. And that's going to be my boring distance right here. It says that it's 4 millimeters. And so we saw on the Kreg jig earlier, it's got an adjustment from 3 up to 6 millimeters. And so now we know that we need to adjust that to 4 millimeters. And we would then be able to drill the hole properly and come up with this correct distance. It also does provide the mounting plate information for us down here. So we would know on our cabinet itself how far back we need to drill the screw holes in order to put those mounting plates in. So now that we have this information, we can go back to our Kreg jig and go ahead and drill our holes for those hinges.
So we now know with our Kreg jig here what our measurements need to be on these adjustable cams. So we're going to adjust these down at the bottom here. I have them set to 3 from the last time I used it. We're just going to give it 1 click to 4 on this side, 1 click to 4 on this side, and it's set up and ready to go. Now we're going to actually do this. We're going to drill a hole real quick here because I want to show you a couple of things once we're done. I'm just going to do it on this scrap piece of wood. Obviously, if you're doing this for real, you may want to start on a scrap piece of wood just to make sure that your measurements are correct. I did that many times. I just double checked with a scrap board before I went and did it on my actual door board. But let's go ahead and drill the hole. and then we'll come back and see what we got. And there we go. And you'll see now that that is right at the correct spot for our hinge. And once you're done drilling, you can go ahead and leave the clamp on actually, but leave the clamp on. You would then take your drill bit out, and there's two little holes that are in this jig that you can grab a 1/16 inch drill bit and drill through those holes just a little bit to start pilot holes for your screws that will ultimately hold in your hinge. Drill through and drill another one. So now when I take this off, I've got a perfect spot for the hinge, and I've got a perfect spot for the screws. All right, and then the final piece of this puzzle is to put the hinge in, and look at that, it fits perfectly. And then we can go ahead and put a screw in on this side into our pilot hole, which again, that'll ensure the precision. We'll know that we're putting this right where it belongs. To make it flush and square. There we go. And now that the hinge is installed, the last step is to put the mounting plate on the cabinet itself. The spreadsheet we were looking at earlier had the exact measurement on where you would put that in relation to the cabinet. So once that's installed, we'll just pretend this is on the cabinet. This is just going to actually pop in. There's a little clip on the back, and then it would close on the door and open. Now that does have these cams. I mentioned earlier I got the cams so that I can slide it slightly forward, backward, up, down, ever so slightly. And then the great thing with these Bloom hinges is it can just pop right off if you need to take the door off for any reason. So thanks to Craig, we now know that we can be precise in making our holes for our hinges. And thanks to Bloom and their spreadsheet, we now know exactly where we need to drill these holes. So hopefully next time you're working on a cabinet project where you're adding doors, or any other hinge project for that matter, you feel a little more comfortable making your measurements and drilling your holes. Keep in mind that if you do go with a different brand of hinge, the measurements may be different. So you probably don't want to rely on the Bloom spreadsheet if you don't buy the Bloom hinges. I hope this has been helpful for you. Would really appreciate it if you'd like the video, subscribe to my page, and of course leave any comments or questions you have below. The offset. And then once I do know, I often end up getting a bit and drilling in. Let's do something here. Today we're talking about pocket holes. And to be honest with you, I would much rather be talking about pocket holes and how you can do them yourself than talking about paying someone else and having holes in your pocket. Yeah, I came up with that one myself. Pretty proud of it. I've been thinking about that for about an hour. All right, let's try this again. So today we're talking about pocket holes. Pocket holes are used to join boards together. Typically it's a joint in the corner. And you have multiple options for the way you're going to join boards together. You've got the mortise and tenon joint, you've got a dovetail, you've got biscuits. To be honest with you, when you look at the mortise and tenon joint, however, compared to the pocket hole, you're looking at probably double the strength with this pocket hole. So we're going to focus on these today. There's another jig out there from Craig. Got to be honest, makes things super easy. This is going to be a short video because you really don't have to spend a lot of time with these. Similar to the hinge project that we looked at before, this jig makes this go super quick. So I'm going to show you how to use this jig, and then you're going to be off and running on your own. So let's take a look. So I promise you this will be a short video, and that's exactly what it's going to be, because pocket holes are so simple to do. Thanks to Craig and this jig they made, you could be at any experience level and get these done in a matter of minutes. So let's take a look at what they've included in the kit. Within the kit itself, you've got the actual jig. This is going to be your bench jig. You know, this is a little bit large to be able to carry to your workspace if you've already started working on a project. But if you've got a whole bunch of boards already assembled and you need to take the jig to your boards, they've got this smaller version that you can put right onto your board. And so all the magic really happens inside of this guy right here. And I'm going to show you how to use this in a second here when we put together boards. But you do, again, similar to everything else that we've talked about in previous videos, you do need to know what your board width is, because that's going to matter when we set this jig. It's going to go for the exact thickness of your board and drill the right hole in the right spot. So make sure you have the board thickness before you get started on this. Beyond what we've already talked about, you also get this dust collector. Drilling pocket holes, you would be surprised at how much dust you end up with, how many wood shavings. And so you can pop this in here when you start, and you can hook up your shop vac to it. If you have a dust collection system like I do, it's just integrated inside of my workbench. You can just plug it in right there. That'll help keep some of the sawdust from floating obviously into your workspace, especially if you have a smaller workspace or you're doing it inside your house. Keep it clean, keep it tidy. That's the way to go. So let's take a look, see how we can make these pocket holes. All right, I promised we could do this quick, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. So I've measured my board thickness, and we're gonna do a 3/4 inch plywood today. One of the first things you need to do is take the drill bit that it comes with and make sure that the collar matches whatever your board width is. And the jig has measurements on either side to make sure that you put the collar in the right spot. So because I have 3/4, I've already gone ahead and set this up, but let me show you what we're gonna do. We're gonna lay this here, and you loosen the collar with an Allen key as necessary, and you'll lay it down and you'll slide this to line up, in my case again 3/4 inch. And so you'll see you definitely don't want to go to the tip of your drill bit. You want to go all the way down here, and we've got 3/4 lined up and ready to go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the piece that we actually use to put our holes into. This also has the board thickness. Again, we need to go to 3/4, so we'll drop this in and we're going to slide it down to that 3/4 mark. You can see they've really thought about all the different size boards to help you out here. The next thing we need to do is we need to clamp in our board. So I've got my 3/4 inch ply here. Why don't we do it this way? We'll do it this way just to make it a little bit easier. Then the last thing we do is we clamp it in. So we clamp this in, that holds the board in place. One thing to note with pocket holes, you really want to have two connecting, right? There's no reason you'd want to just do one screw for your joint. The way this is set up, if you don't have enough room to do on the wide side here, you can still do the B and the C. So we're gonna go ahead, we have enough room. We're gonna do the A and the C here. So we're gonna drill 2 pocket holes in A and C. And now we can get our drill, put our drill bit in, and we are ready to go. You can see the mess, as I said, that it's already creating here. So if you want to use that attachment, it's probably a good idea that will hook up to your shop vac or dust collection system. And now our pocket holes are drilled. Let's go ahead and connect these boards. So we're going to attach this to this board here. I've got my 1/4 inch screws for this. These are the square head. And it does come with a bit that's long enough to go through the hole, so that's great. Just obviously make sure when you're measuring, you get the right length of screws for your job. So we'll go ahead and put this screw in. You can clamp this. I feel like just given the design of the holes, once I get it lined up, I'm in good shape to put it in there. Then we'll do the other one. And that's done, just like that. Now the last step in this process is your pocket hole plugs. So obviously, you could fill this in with wood filler. That would probably not be ideal given the amount of space that there is to fill. What I like to do is just get these pocket hole plugs that you can readily get out there. They do make them with different types of wood. I typically just get the paint grade ones. And you stick these right inside. I would use a little bit of wood glue and stick it inside just to make sure that's in there well. And then you slide it in, let it dry. And then you could either use, like some of these go in nicer than others. You can use a flush saw if there's too much sticking up, but otherwise you just sand that down a little bit and then you're ready to paint. I promise it'll be quick. Hopefully that was quick enough for you. We were able to drill 2 pocket holes today into this 3/4 inch board to join it to this other one. We made a super strong joint here now. This has not come apart at all unless someone jumps on it with all of their strength to try to break this thing. We talked about the plug holes as well. You can get these plugs, and that way you can fill the hole without having to worry about getting some wood filler and messing with the amount of volume that you would need in those spots. If you have any questions, as always, leave them below. Please like the video, subscribe to my page. Your support's always appreciated.